Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning on our webinar about our Traineeships Business Administration Level 2. On this morning's webinar, you've got myself, Bryony Kingsland, Funding and Policy Lead for City and Guilds, and also you've got Mandy Slaney, our Lead Industry Manager. Morning. Morning, Mandy. Morning, everybody. And as I say, thanks for joining us. We've got quite a few people on this morning, so I'm not sure what it's going to be like questions-wise towards the end. So Mandy and I will work through this as quickly as we can without obviously rushing, to give you plenty of time to ask questions at the end. So to use this webinar function, hopefully most people will know, but if you click on the little red arrow on your menu on the top right hand side of your screen, that should bring your control box out, and you can see there's a box for asking questions. So please do feel free to ask questions and we will cover them at the end. And you are all in mute mode, so it's listen only mode today, and Mandy and I will set off. So hopefully everybody can hear us, but if you are having problems with hearing or with any sort of technicality, if you've got a webcam on, please make sure you turn it off, because that does take up bandwidth and it does affect the sound on webinars, which is one reason why you can't see Mandy and I today, because we've turned our webcams off to make sure that you can't see us and it's not taking up bandwidth, and hopefully that will make the sound quality a little bit better. So without further ado, I'm going to continue on and we'll have a look at what we're doing today. So first of all, why traineeships and why now? Well, there's several reasons. When we realised earlier on this year as an organisation that it was more than likely that there would be no level 2 framework in business administration, Mandy, who is our lead industry manager in that area, decided to talk to some of our providers and our employers about whether it would have an effect on them. And the resounding feedback was yes, that it would. So we held some focus groups with both employers and providers to get a feeling from all of you about what you thought about this and what effect it might have, and whether that would be detrimental, and what we might be able to do to support you to come up with something that could partially or in some cases maybe fully fill that space in business administration level 2. And we got some really interesting feedback from those focus groups. We held 4 in the end. I think the most important feedback is, I mean, although the government has decided not to go ahead with a level 2, and they say that the level 2 business administration standard is not of a high enough quality and doesn't merit a full 12-month minimum duration, which is why they can't go ahead with it. I think there's quite a few people that do not agree with that out there, both employers and providers, who think that there is definitely 12 months worth of provision. But we are where we are, so that's something we're going to have to work with and see what we can do to fill that space. But the other issue that most of the employers, that quite a few of the employers flagged at those focus groups, was they have got many job roles inside their organisations that actually do not support the level 3 business administration standard content anyway. And if you can't actually support that content, then you can't really run a full level 3. The other issue is that we do get a large cohort of school leavers exiting at 16 each year, who do not necessarily want to go into a 2-year full-time course in a college or stay on and do A-levels. And there is not going to be the apprenticeship opportunities anymore for them in business administration, which has been a really great stepping stone qualification onto other careers for those people who may have left school without a full level 2, but the business administration level 2 framework has been their stepping stone to a career, or it has been the start of their career and they've stayed in administration, and you know, it might have taken them a few years to move on to a level 3 type role or into a more management orientated role where they can take another qualification or another apprenticeship. So that stepping stone opportunity for those school leavers has also disappeared as of the 31st of July, when the apprenticeship framework in business administration level 2 finishes, and there will be nothing else there. And as we all know, due to COVID, apprenticeship opportunities are going to be fewer and farther between over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. We really don't know how long the recession post-COVID is going to last, and how long it will take for the economy to, get back to any sort of healthy shape. We do know that it's very, very likely that there will be a very deep recession later on this year. We know that unemployment rates have shot up, and apprenticeship starts have dropped exponentially. So there are currently 2.8 million unemployed. It looks like when the government support packages for employers finishes in September, October, that those unemployment figures will probably rise. That's going to make accessing an apprenticeship far more difficult. And we also know that the bulk of those 2 million unemployed people are currently under 25. And they have quite often been one of the largest cohorts for apprenticeships. So it's going to be a tough market for young people going forward, and it's going to be a tough market for employers. So those are some of the reasons why we looked at a traineeship, and also we looked at a traineeship because of feed-in from both employers and providers about what potentially they thought might be able to fill the space of that business admin level 2. So there are some real benefits to trainees, and particularly I think in a time of high unemployment and lower employment, because remember we've been in a market for the last 4 or 5 years of high employment and low unemployment, and it's really been a sort of, an employees marketplace, and that is going to change to a certain extent. But there are also going to be some employers out there that are struggling financially, so for them, taking on extra apprentices and paying those apprenticeship wages could be a tough decision to make. One of the things about a traineeship is the employer does have the opportunity to assess a trainee before potentially offering them a job or an apprenticeship. The other benefit, which is for employers, it's not obviously such a benefit for trainees, but many of them will be unemployed and receiving benefits anyway. So trainees do not necessarily receive a salary from the employer. Some employers do choose to pay a minimum wage to trainees, but most employers don't. What they do quite often do is choose to pay expenses. So as an employer, they have the opportunity to assess a trainee and to see what that worker might be like. And to have them on board for anything between, it's got to be a minimum of 100 hours from 1st of August. There has been a dispensation from the ESFA recently to only deliver 70 hours work placement as part of traineeships up until the 31st of July because of the virus. We don't yet know if that's going to be extended. There's been no news about that recently. So if it is extended, of course, we will send out a bulletin about that so that everyone's aware, and obviously the ESFA will do that as well. But at the moment there's no extension for that. So 1st of August we are assuming that it's back to a minimum of 100 hours work placement, and that is the minimum. You can go for longer. So employers, obviously they've got to put in training, but they can have, junior members of staff inside their organisation that they don't necessarily have to pay a wage to, that they'll have to commit some time and some effort to from the point of view of training, but also those trainees can carry out, jobs for them as a trainee as part of their role, which can support the employer. Trainees get the opportunity to learn some sector skills in a sector that they may not have any skills or knowledge in, but which they are interested in working in. We also know that as part of COVID, there's been a lot of displaced sectors. So at the moment, hospitality and catering is an area that's struggling quite a bit. And it may well be that a lot of workers from hospitality and catering with only basic experience in that sector are now beginning to look at other sectors that might suit them. And for example, hospitality and catering staff quite often have really strong transferable skills for the health and care sector, which is a growing sector. So traineeships in the health and care sector may be a real opportunity for both employers and providers and learners, for the learner to actually gauge if health and care is something they'd be interested in, and to get some skills and some knowledge in that sector, which would put them ahead of the rest of any cohorts potentially that might be applying for apprenticeships in health and care. Or other roles in health and care, so they get to gain those skills. The employer gets to see the trainee and assess whether they think they are suitable for the health and care sector or any other sector that the trainee is interested in. And it does give the trainee a head start in apprenticeship interviews at a later date or other job interviews. And it can also give the employer the opportunity to look at someone and decide whether that learner is actually giving the employer a head start if they are recruiting in the future. And traineeships can last anything up to a year. And it could well be that in a year's time, an employer's business is on the up rather than in a deep recession. And at that point, they could potentially take on a trainee any time during the traineeship and make them a permanent employee or apprentice. And for providers, this is an option for learners who can't find an apprenticeship, who do not want to or cannot do a full-time 2-year course. It can fill that space of the level 2 traineeship in business administration, and we'll show you more about that later on. Mandy's going to talk about our framework and what we've put together to support employers and providers with that level 2 business admin. There's a lot of employers out there who are still looking to meet their corporate social responsibility targets, and traineeships can help them do that. And at a time when the market is going to be tough from the point of view of taking on new staff and supporting social mobility and supporting equality and diversity, traineeships can help to do that as part of their corporate social responsibility targets. And as I said earlier on, many of the younger people who are going to be made unemployed due to COVID-19 and have transferable skills for other sectors, but don't have any skills or knowledge of that sector, a trainee can help them, provide them with some basic knowledge in the particular sector they might be interested in, whether that's hospitality and catering into health or social care, or other skills that they've got that are transferable into other sectors or into other job roles. Oh, hang on, that's not moving on. Oh, there we go. So obviously there's going to be providers on here who may already know what a traineeship is, but we also know that there are providers out there that don't run traineeships and they might want to know a bit more about them. So this slide tells you about a traineeship and what some of the rules are, and I'll talk about the funding for a traineeship in a minute, so that's more got more clarity. So traineeships are for young people with little or no work experience. So they're young people that are unemployed. So it's only for those people that are in the unemployment sector. It's for those who are assessed as having the potential to be ready for an employment or an apprenticeship or further training within 6 months. So that's not for this is not for learners that are quite a long way from the job market. So if you've got a learner that's going to need a lot more support than anything that will happen within 6 weeks to 6 months, then a traineeship isn't for them. This is really for those who are motivated to work, but who lack the skills, experience and behaviours needed by employers or by that particular sector. If the learner has already got a full level 3 qualification, they cannot take a traineeship. That's one of the eligibility criteria put in place by the ESFA. So if they've got a full level 3, so they've got 2 A-levels, or they've got a full level 3 diploma or certificate, then they cannot take a traineeship. They need to look at other forms of learning to help them move into new roles and new employment. And traineeships are for 16 to 18-year-olds and 19 to 23-year-olds, but they are funded via separate funding streams, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, a traineeship program consists of the core content of the program, which I'll cover in a minute, a work placement and the optional vocational element, and that's really important here, particularly with the business admin level 2 traineeship, because you can add in vocational elements. Not only do they increase the funding you can draw down for a traineeship, but those optional vocational elements are the elements which can give a learner specific skills for a sector they may be interested in, which is going to put them ahead of a game if they're applying for an apprenticeship or a job role, but also it can offer some of those skills that employers are looking for in business admin that the level 2 framework used to cover. So what's the traineeship model? So the core content is a focused period of work preparation training, and that can cover areas like CV writing, interview prep, job search, interpersonal skills. Some of those more transferable skills that employers might look for as well could be added in here. And we're currently looking at a framework for transferable skills from within our work skills offer. So that could be things like team working, communication. It could be anything in those more transferable soft skills that the employer themselves are looking for. And Mandy can mention more about this later on. Also within that core content is the English and Maths if required. Now that's all about the condition of funding for English and Maths. So if you've got a learner that doesn't have the full level 2 in functional skills in Maths or English, they will need to take the Maths or English functional skills qualification at level 1 or level 2, depending on where you assess them as being in your initial diagnostic of their Maths and English level, if they don't already have a GCSE at Maths or English in the relevant grades. Then the next part of the traineeship model is the work placement. Now this is a high quality work experience placement. It should be in the sector that the young person is interested in, and obviously the employer has to agree to offer that work placement to the young people and be willing to help them experience and develop some of those workplace skills. So it's got to be a minimum of 100 hours. That's 70 hours up until the 31st of July. But at the moment, as I said earlier, after the 31st of July, it goes back up to a minimum of a 100 hours work placement. And that doesn't mean it just has to be 100 hours, because many employers out there might be willing to offer a work placement to a young person that's more than 100 hours to give them more of an opportunity to see the young person and work with the young person, but also give the young person more opportunity to develop those skills. Under those circumstances, you can, it may well be that the offer is, the employer is willing to offer expenses for travel and maybe for lunches, etc. There is also a bursary that you can claim for apprentices, and I'll talk more about that in a minute as part of the funding option. And then the final element of the traineeship model is the flexible element, or the sort of non-mandatory element, which is the optional vocational part of the traineeship. Now, this needs to be a high quality and relevant vocational qualification, and or an offer of skills required for the local labour market, or the sector in which the the traineeship is interested in, or the employer is interested in. It can also be business and commercial and enterprise skills, and or ICT skills if they're needed. So that's the traineeship model. Those are three elements: the core content, the work placement, and the optional vocational elements. So let's have a look at the funding for that now. So 19 to 24 traineeships. This is funded generally out of the adult education budget. Hold on, I'm just going to take a swig of water because I'm getting a dry throat from talking so much. So this is the 19 to 24 apprenticeships are funded out of the adult education budget. So if you have an adult education budget contract with the ESFA, you can deliver apprenticeships, but you cannot do that until you've got agreement from the ESFA. And I'll give some links at the end of the session, which actually take you to the pages that the ESFA has put out there. So you can put a business case into them to ask if you can deliver traineeships. If you do deliver traineeships with your adult education budget and you decide this is a route that you are going to go down, and the ESFA offer you an allocation of adult education budget to deliver a traineeship, that allocation can only be used to deliver traineeships. You can't via it or use it to deliver other adult education budget courses or programs. That sort of ring-fenced budget becomes solely dedicated to your delivery of traineeships. So you need to think long and properly, and obviously put a strategy in place for delivery of your traineeships, and talk to your employers before, if you haven't done it before, going ahead and making that decision and asking the ESFA to allocate part of your adult education budget to traineeships. The other thing to be aware of is that the adult education budget traineeship funding has not been devolved to combined authorities. So if you're in combined authority area, unless you've already got an arrangement with your combined authority to deliver traineeships, well, actually you won't have an arrangement to deliver combined traineeships with your combined authority, because it still remains a national programme. It's run by the ESFA. So if you are in a combined authority area, you would still have to go to the ESFA to ask for funding to deliver traineeships over and above the contract that you have with your combined authority to deliver adult education budget. So this would come in as a separate funding stream into your budget from the ESFA, and you could only use it to deliver traineeships. Now, obviously the 16 to 19 traineeships are funded by the normal 16 to 19 funding allocation that goes to colleges and some private training providers, and that's based on hours. And you can also claim a bursary for vulnerable groups out of the 16 to 19 cohort, up to £1,200 a year. And there are discretionary bursaries which providers can award to help under 19 learners as well. Any of your learning support for your traineeship in the 19 plus actually sits already within that adult education budget. So you'll be using that allocation to support it. So a few bits and pieces just to be aware of as well. If you decide to deliver a traineeship, so you are delivering traineeships, at the end, to draw down the sort of final part of the traineeship funding, the employer must offer one of those 3 points you see there: a formal interview for a job or apprenticeship, an exit interview with written feedback, and evidence of the learner's time and activities during the work placement. You need to keep that as a provider because it will be potentially audited by the ESFA at their funding audits, or progression to a defined other positive outcome within 6 months. So that's either further education and training, an apprenticeship elsewhere with another employer, or it could be another job elsewhere using the skills and knowledge that they've gained during their traineeship. And for work placements for 16 to 18-year-olds, the work placement has to be the most substantial element of the programme, and it must be reported in the ILR as the core aim in a learner's traineeship. So for 16 to 18-year-olds, it's the work placement where they gain most of their skills and knowledge, and it has to be the substantial element. So although for 16 to 18-year-olds, you normally find that actually traineeships are a slightly longer program because the work placement is longer. But if you were going to run the business admin level 2, you'd also have to take into account the amount of hours of delivery for that particular qualification that you might be running as part of that. So let's have a look at that in a bit more detail. This is the business admin level 2. Mandy's going to cover some of the resources and I'll cover the funding bit of this. So I'm going to pass over to Mandy now, and hopefully she's not on mute and you can hear her. Mandy, can you unmute yourself so we can hear you?
Morning.
Morning. Okay, I'll pass over to you, hon, but I'll move the slides along for you, so just ask me.
Okay.
Okie dokie, hang on. There we go. Oh, this is the funding example. So shall I cover this?
And yeah, then I'll do the next ones.
Okay, sorry guys. So for 19 plus funding, these are just funding examples, and these actually are taken from a resource that's on our website now, on our traineeship pages. So we have specialist site dedicated traineeships. So we'll show you that afterwards and also show you the link to it. So example 1 is a 19 plus funding, and this is how the 19 plus funding works. So you've got the traineeship core element, and that is a flat fee of £970. Not exactly the most stimulating funding amount for running a traineeship. Which is where I think the rest of the income that can come from the remaining elements of a traineeship can bump up the potential funding for a traineeship to make it more worthwhile for you as providers. Because £970 for a course, particularly if it's a longer course, is not a brilliant amount of money, and obviously I know it does not make it that attractive. So if you are drawing down English and maths functional skills because your learner doesn't have a full level 2, then you add that on top. And then there's the optional vocational element. And this can be any qualification, and in particular, we're obviously talking about business administration today, but it can be any qualification which will fit within delivery of the maximum 6-month duration of a traineeship. As I said earlier, a traineeship is a minimum of 6 weeks and a maximum of 6 months in duration. Apart from at the moment during COVID and up to the end of July this year, it can go up to 12 months, but that was just to take into account any delays which might have occurred during delivery because of lockdown. But as far as we know, that ends on the 31st of July, and we go back to a maximum 6-month duration of an apprenticeship. So it's got to be a qualification that can be delivered within that 6 months, and we've actually added a list into this resource. This is the first page of the resource you can see on the screen here. But we've added in a list of potential business admin qualifications that might suit delivery within a 6-month time limit. And also our course directory, our online course directory, which I produce each year, does give you an opportunity to filter by guided learning hours. So you could filter for an amount of learning hours which would conceivably be delivered within that 6 months. And you can also filter by sector subject area, and that's what's given us our list of business admin qualifications which would fit in a business admin framework. So that's the 19 plus that you can see on the side there, and the final potential funding for this qualification or for this traineeship would be 3,142, which is a bit more attractive. Example 2 is the 16 to 19 funding methodology, and as we all know, that's not funded per qualification, it's funded by guided learning hours. So dependent on how many guided learning hours, or how many planned hours, rather, not guided learning hours, sorry, planned hours are within your traineeship, you will get the national funding rate per student on the right-hand side, obviously with all the normal uplifts that come with retention, and for area uplifts, etc., that you might also get according to that student. So you fund your 16 to 19-year-olds out of the national funding rate. So that's the funding example for a traineeship. And then I'm just moving it on, and I think the next slide is definitely Mandy's. So go ahead, Mandy.
Okay, thank you. So what we've tried to do, so we've put 2 examples together, and this was really based from some of the feedback from the focus groups, and also a variety of different assessment methods in some cases. This is only a starter, really. These are just 2 examples that we've started off with. We are going to put additional examples together, and again, that's where we're going to be working with providers to help do that. And if providers have got example models that they're delivering already that are working really well, you know, we'd like to showcase them and put them on our website. So the example one, what we found throughout all of this was it really does need a mixture of all the work placement and the employability skills, maths and English and vocational, and that came really loud and clear from the focus groups. And one thing that really stood out as well is one model isn't going to fit all, and we felt that even though we've given 2 examples, providers felt that they could, you know, they could be delivering multiple example models, delivery models, depending on the learners and also the employers. So again, that's something that we want to expand on more. So within the employability was a core across, and the feedback was around a lot of the softer skills that's required, really. Things like personal motivation, also them just turning up on time. I think they were, you know, some of the key things that came through. So what we've done is we've put examples in. So you've got the awarding employability skills and the different sizes, and within them there was a really nice mix of units which covered all the core areas that we think that, you know, is needed to help that learner progress on, you know, to apprenticeships. So, I mean, some of the key sort of skills and behaviours that were highlighted were things like communication, personal motivation, challenging peers, interpersonal skills. And the other thing that fits really nicely in both the example 1 and 2 is there is a project unit. Now, if you look at obviously the business admin level 2 and level 3, you know, projects are a core part of them apprenticeships, and they're the areas we're finding learners are really struggling with. The same on customer service level 3. Actually, them actually putting a project together and the planning and preparation, research, you know, is something that they actually do need to develop the skills in order to do that. So that is where within the employability that'll fit really nicely. Then we put a mixture of maths and English, and again they can be tailored to, you know, the learners and what they've already completed, what they've already achieved, and also, you know, progression and where they need to go to. Then on the vocational taster, there's we've put different sizes in there, but also we've put a mixture of competence and knowledge. So the feedback again was that some organisations felt that a competence-based qualification to actually do some MVQ units would be appropriate, and in other cases, more so they'd rather have more of an online or an assignment-based qualification. So that in model 1 we've actually given the 2 examples. Model 2 is very similar. It's just a different variety of sizes in there. We put a slightly smaller award in business and administration, and then with again the MVQ award, so the competence based, and then the certificate. That, you know, they can be mixed and matched. They're just giving you examples of possible qualifications that you could build into that programme. And also what we found was within them qualifications, they had some core units which would help the learners to be able to progress, you know, onto level 2s, level 3s, and hopefully ultimately be able to achieve the level 3. As we know, what came out of the focus groups is that may not be for all learners, because in a lot of cases they may not, as Bryony mentioned earlier, some learners may not be in the right job role to be able to cover the breadth of the level 3 business administrator, administrator, and others just may not be capable, and, you know, level 2 might be as far as they can go on that. But I think, you know, there is lots of things where we can do mix and match programs. This is a traineeship example, but we'll talk a little bit more about next steps and the models that we're looking at. Right, Bryony? Again, this is just a list. What we've done is pulled a list of qualifications, a variety of different business qualifications that you may want to consider. This is all within the traineeship section on our website. We've tried to put everything in one place so you can have a look at that and have a look at the types of units. What you'll find is there's a mixture, particularly of assessment methods in there. So have a look through some of them, the sizes as well, and that was a key thing. Some people wanted short qualifications, some wanted bigger to make a more robust program. So we tried to put a real mix in there. There are, as you know from our qualifications list, there's lots more qualifications that we do, but these are the core ones.
Is that it, Mandy?
That's it, sorry, yeah.
Okay, great, brilliant. So the last three pages or slides that you've seen are actually the three areas of the resource which you can download from our website, and we'll cover that in a minute. So I've got the links to that, so you can actually download this resource and see those qualifications, see the funding methodology that we've put in, and also the sort of example traineeship level 2 frameworks as well. So hang on, that's not moving on. Let's try again. Right, so we've built a City and Guilds traineeship website to help support you. And this is what it looks like. It states what are traineeships. It does give links to some of the Skills Funding Agency rules and regulations around traineeships. It also, you can see here on the right-hand side part of the screen, there's a download our traineeship program fact sheet. That's the resource you've just seen, so you can download that safely to your computer, so you've got access to it whenever you want. There's information about contact. There's also links to the Business Administration post-safe. So we've tried to make it as comprehensive as possible and put information in there that will help you. We are still working on it, and it's a developing site. So if you think there's something in there that's missing or information that you think you would like to see in our website, then please do let Mandy and I know, and we can make any changes or additions that are needed, because it will be a developing site to support you. At the moment, there's the business admin links, but we are talking to lots of providers, and we'd also appreciate feedback from anybody on the webinar about any other traineeship frameworks that you think would support you or your employers in the coming sort of 12 to 18 months, because we can develop other frameworks. We've developed the business admin because we know there's going to be that real gap at the end of July when the framework disappears. But if there are other traineeships which might help support, during recession, post-COVID, then and that will also obviously help you to effectively spend your adult education budget or your 16 to 18 funding, then do let us know, and we can think seriously about whether to develop a framework to support you with that as well. So I've sort of covered that last slide, haven't I? Is what other sector subject areas do you or your employers need, or are they asking about? And if there's anything that they're saying to you about their skills and training needs challenges during COVID-19, how can we support you and them to help meet those needs? And also developing other frameworks, traineeship frameworks to support other sector subject areas. So those are our contact details. Feed that into our customer services team, and they'll feed it back to us, or you can send Mandy and I a direct email. That's another way of doing it. And then finally, these are the traineeship and business admin links. So the top one there is the ESFA guidance for funding for traineeships. That's a page actually on traineeships, which also gives you links to, if you've got adult education budget and you want to use it to deliver traineeships, the business case that the ESFA asks you to put in to enable you to use some of your adult education budget to deliver traineeships. That second link is the City and Guilds delivering our qualifications funding pages, which I developed and have got up there. And that's where you'll find our course directory, which gives you a full spreadsheet list of all the courses and programs which City and Guilds have developed and have available and funded by the ESFA. And that spreadsheet is split off into different tabs for 16 to 18 adult education budget, loans, qualifications. So you can go into the relevant spreadsheet for your cohort of learners, and then you can filter those spreadsheets by sector subject area, guided learning hours, qualification title, what stream it's funded by, i.e. local flex or legal entitlement to level 2 or legal entitlement to level 3, or whatever. So that's that second link. The third link is our traineeships page, and the fourth link is our specific business admin traineeships page. And that's it. And we do have some questions, but before we do that, I think Mandy's just got a message from our one of our customer services and product teams that she's just going to give to you, because I think it would be really useful for you to be aware of this. Mandy, do you want to go ahead and pass on that message from Nicole while I pop out?
Absolutely. I wanted just to add a couple of other bits as well, really. I think just as a follow-on to all of that, is that it is very much a work in progress, this. And one of the key areas we decided after the focus groups was traineeships was the area that we felt there was more appetite for, and we felt that would fit the best. However, we know that's not going to fit for all. So we are working behind the scenes on additional delivery models. And we did put a plea for if anybody was interested in being involved in very in smaller working groups to actually look at the granular detail really of particular units and putting more delivery models together. Thank you for the people that came forward. We haven't forgotten about you, and we will be in touch very shortly. However, we've had the qualification, mitigation and dispensations curveballs. So over the next few weeks, we will be setting up some working groups. So if you want to be involved in that, please either email the email address that's on the deck of slides or email me directly, which is mandy.slaney@cityandguilds.com. The other thing we're looking at is online resources. We have lots of resources and support within City and Guilds. So once we can identify the sort of key units that are common in most delivery models that we feel that will be needed, we are looking to actually package up sort of an online resource to support the delivery. So again, that's something we'll be looking at. So with regards to the message, really, the other thing what we're looking at is how can we support you to bespoke the delivery of the level 2 customer service practitioner to meet the needs for the NHS and health sector. What we found from the focus groups was that it is quite a niche group, and the actual units and progression required will be, need to be tailored to their needs. So what we're going to do is look at delivering a webinar, which will be sending the details of that out in along with a deck of slides. But also what we will be doing is tailoring some of the working groups to be specifically around the NHS and the health sector. We did have some employers join the focus groups, and we have lots of other employers in the NHS which we're going to invite to the working groups to really make sure that the delivery models are going to be fit for purpose. And that's it from me, Bryony.
Would the individual undertaking a trainee still receive government funded benefits? Yes. The maximum amount of time that a learner can do on a traineeship is 35 hours a week, so they still fit those benefits requirements. So I'll read out what the IfATE is saying. All elements of the programme, including the work placement, are subject to a maximum of 35 hours activity each week to make sure that the young person can meet the requirements of state benefit rules. So that's all activity, including the work placement. So you'd have to balance your work placement with the other learning that the learner needs to do. So, I mean, in some cases, we know we've seen employers that will have the work placement in 3 days a week, and the rest of the time they're at the college or learning remotely. Or in some cases, they do a full 2-week work placement, and the rest of the time is them taking on board the skills and knowledge. So it can be block or it can be by days, totally up to you. So yes, so there's, can traineeships only last 6 months after July? Yes, that's the COVID rules, but we don't think the COVID rules will go back later. The bursary funds come out of your existing allocation? No, they don't. So the bursary funds for vulnerable students, those students, you have to claim it. You can claim up to an extra £1,200 bursary funds for vulnerable students. Additional learning support for adult education budget comes out of your allocation, but in 16 to 19, you can actually claim extra funds for a traineeship for the 16 to 19-year-olds over and above the money that that is claimed as part of the delivery. So for 16 to 19-year-olds, there are extra funds that can be claimed, and those links that we've given you at the end of the slides, those will take you to the traineeship pages that the IfATE put in place, and you can find out more about that in detail. Yes, you can deliver traineeships remotely, obviously as long as that works for the type of qualification it is. And in actual fact, administration and business administration qualifications work really well being delivered remotely. Obviously, you need to speak to the employer about the work placement because there has to be social distancing rules in place for the interim, and you'd have to work out with the employer how they could do that with the trainee. I think I've confirmed funding for 16 to 19. So the 16 to 19 funding is there in our resource, which you can download directly from our website. Someone's asked a question about TQT, and what does TQT mean? That means total qualification time. So that's the time that the learner spends on program actually learning directly in the classroom, which is the guided learning hours. And then any other learning hours are the work placement and any study that the learner might do in the evening, any pastoral sort of study or projects that you might add to the traineeship as well. And that amounts to the total qualification time. Yes, a traineeship can be at level 1 as well as level 2. Yes, we will email out the slides at the end of the session. We always do that, and we'll also email out the Q&A as well. Someone's asked, can unit examples all be delivered online or distance learning until it's safe to visit employers? And the answer is yes. Units can also be delivered as part of a traineeship, and you can deliver them online if obviously they meet the needs of online training, and that works. And yes, you will get a copy of the presentation. Do you have City and Guilds champions to support FE colleges? We do have City and Guilds leads for individual providers. So you will normally get a business manager if you're one of our providers. It does depend on the size, because we do not supply business managers for really small contracts. It's just not financially viable for us. But if you have a sizable contract with City and Guilds or a sizable delivery model with City and Guilds, then yes, you should actually have a City and Guilds business manager, or you would be allocated a City and Guilds business manager if you started delivering lots of our qualifications, and they will give you all the support. We also do these webinars that we've done for you internally, so all of our staff get trained on what the offer is and any new products or services that we're offering that can support you. So they get trained on that, and they'll also be able to chat these through with you at the same time, because they do get in-depth knowledge from us. So did you say a formal interview or an interview at the end? Yes, they have to have a formal interview at the end of the traineeship via the employer if they are not going on to be employed by the employer. Read the 100 hours. Is this simply set within the working time directive, or is there a minimum maximum hours per week? Yes, I think I've sort of covered that in terms of the 35 hours maximum. So there's obviously for a young person, that 35 hours maximum also includes any learning they're taking on board. So that does keep them within the working time directive. In terms of approval from City and Guilds to deliver apprenticeships, is there a qualification bundle, or do we need to be approved for each of the elements? Oh, that's a very good question that I'm not sure I can answer. Mandy, can you answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you'd need to be approved for the individual components. Years ago we did apprenticeship packages. We don't do that now, so you'd have to just make sure you've got approval for all the individual qualifications. But if you've got any questions on that, either myself can answer it, or the sales team will be able to support you with that, to talk you through the process.
Yeah, that we gave the number on at the on one of the slides, which you'll get later on today. Yes. You said that traineeships have a maximum time of 6 months, but earlier you mentioned some. Oh yes, so the 1 year traineeships were extended during COVID for a maximum duration of 1 year. So that's if you had to put something on hold because of COVID. There was an extension to the timeline that a traineeship can last, and that was basically so that if there were trainees that had started earlier on this year but they couldn't continue for any reason, that they would be able to go beyond the 6 months to enable them to complete the traineeship if needed. But that actually ends on the 31st of July, when, as far as we know so far, the ESFA is not keeping any of those dispensations for extensions and reduction in work placement as part of the COVID changes that they've applied to various courses and trainees. So no, generally, as far as we know, from the 1st of August this year, a traineeship will last a maximum of 6 months and a minimum of 6 weeks. So if any other questions, I think that seems to be, oh, you said that, yes. Can functional skills IT be added to increase funding? I think functional, oh, now that's a very good question. There's nothing at the moment inside the traineeship funding rules to state that functional skills, in addition to the English and math, which are part of the current framework, could be added. But you could add the functional skills IT in as the flexible element of the traineeship if needed. So you could do it that way. Can parents still claim child benefit? That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that, Zoe Gregory. I thought the child benefit finished at the age of 16 so that they couldn't claim it anymore. And I also think that actually with child benefit, if your 16-year-old is claiming universal credit or job seekers allowance, that the parent can no longer claim child benefit. But I'm not a benefits expert, I'm afraid. So that is something I think that you would need to take up with DWP or with Job Centre Plus and find out. But I'll see if I can find out anything and let you know. Can they do work experience in your workplace if relevant? As in, oh, I'm not sure what you mean by that, Jess. Can they do work experience in your workplace? If you mean the college workplace or the provider workplace, I don't see why providers and colleges should be excluded from taking on a trainee. Obviously, you'd have to be very careful about what you were doing it for and making sure that it did actually make a difference to the learner. And yes, we will share a recording of this. Someone's just asked that question. So yes, I don't see why you could be excluded, but if the ESFA were to see, you know, suddenly hundreds of traineeships taking place in college and them gaining work experience in college, I think they might have some questions about that. So it would have to be a serious traineeship that you could deliver yourself in the college that was actually going to potentially result in an apprenticeship or a job or real work experience for that individual trainee. And they were also interested in working in the education sector. So that's how that would work. I hope that answers that question. And that's all the questions we've got. Thanks very much, everybody. So I hope that was helpful. We will send out slides. We will send out a recording sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours. There's quite a few questions there that I've got to wade through to produce the Q&A with Mandy. So that might take us the next 24. So hopefully you'll get a copy of the recording and a copy of the Q&A and the slides by tomorrow at the latest. But thanks very much, everybody. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.